Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into the podcast. Welcome back. This is episode number 37, looking at our emotions, why we have them, what to do with them, and especially how to process them if you are a performance-driven person. Marc shares some really great stories about his life as a very performance-driven pastor and how he came to emotional health. But let me first say thank you so much to everybody for tuning in on the Kim Walker-Smith podcast as well as the William Paul Young podcast. I've had so much feedback and it's all amazing. I'm really, really touched, really glad. It's been really great to connect with many people on Instagram and on Twitter, Facebook as well. So I'm really thankful for that. And I want to say too, if you have ever faced depression, anxiety, panic attacks, even suicidal thoughts, I'm starting a book study in a couple of weeks on a really beautiful devotional called Fearless in 21 Days. And it's by a woman named Sarah E. Ball. And Sarah shares a really powerful story. She was a mother of 5 and ended up totally crippled by panic attacks, anxiety. I've had my own journey with depression and panic attacks. I want to share with you my story and share a story. We're going to study this book over 4 or 5 weeks. And I want you to join. I want you to be part of it. You need to go to patreon.com/Jonathan Puddle. Join up for any of my supporter tiers, and then we're going to do that book study. It's going to be really cool, I think. If you join the Book Lovers tier, I'll send you the book for free, as well as any other books that we do for further book studies. I'm really excited about this one, guys. I have a really good feeling. I think a lot of people's lives are going to be touched. So check that out, patreon.com/Jonathan Puddle. You'll see a post there all about the book study, and it starts on the 23rd of April, so you've got a little bit of time to get the book before we begin. And Sarah's going to be on the show here as well after the book study wraps up, so if you want to ask her any questions, then join the book study so we can collect it all and then speak to her here on the podcast. Speaking of, let's listen to a podcast right now. All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast with me, Jonathan Puddle. I'm very excited to have on the show Marc Alan Schelske, if you look at the full author name, because you have to have a middle name, I think, if you're writing books. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thank you so much. I think many people have middle names, even people who aren't authors.
I have a middle name, but I am not planning to put it on my book because my name is distinct enough.
Yeah, that was a weird personal quirk choice of mine that I have this burden that I don't know if you're familiar with, that I sometimes measure my sense of value and security by how well things I put out into the world are received by other people.
Oh, that sounds very healthy.
Yeah, it's terrible. And so when I made the choice to put my full name on the things that I write in public, that is to remind me that the people who know me as Marc, and they're not the people who are judging me based on the blogs I write and the books I write and the content I put out into the world. I'm just Marc. And so that's a distinction, right? My professional name, Marc Alan Schelske, is to remind me that, oh yeah, that's not really the full interior of who I am. That's in some ways a product, right? We're all putting stuff out into the world, and we're all hoping to be something and communicate something, even if we want to do it authentically. You know, we don't take Instagram pictures of every single moment of our day. We take Instagram pictures of certain ones, right? So all of a sudden I've curated
vulnerability.
Right, exactly. So Marc Alan Schelske is the imagined public persona, and Marc is just the guy trying his best to be authentic before God and friends, and we'll see how that goes.
I like that distinction. That's very healthy. I have one of my best friends. I've had her on the show. She is a big beauty blogger and Instagrammer and tutorials and stuff, and I wrestle with that. I look at all these beautifully presented photos and videos, and then I'm like, and I feel this weird mix of feelings. And then I'm like, oh yeah, but we'll be having dinner on Friday. So I kind of can just ignore all this.
Right.
I can ignore this perfection.
Yeah.
Okay, so who are we talking to today then? Marc Schelske or Marc Alan Schelske?
We are going to talk to Marc about some of the things Marc Alan Schelske has put out into the world.
Excellent.
Is that weird? That weird?
No, that sounds good. For those of you who don't know, Marc and I met a couple of years ago at a writing retreat with our mutual colleague / friend, Frank Viola, who some of you will have heard on this show before, and you will hear him again. Actually, you know what? I logged into Facebook today, and it said it was our 2-year friendversary today.
2-year friendversary. Oh, that's special.
So, in the last 2 years, you have put out a book called The Wisdom of Your Heart. And those of you who've been paying attention will have probably heard me brag about this book more than any other single book. My life basically consists of The Wisdom of Your Heart and Henry Nouwen.
Oh, geez.
But all, so one Schelske book is equal to the library of
Oh, dear. No. Deflate.
But your book has been hugely instrumental in my life. And as I've been on a journey of unpacking my own emotions and even just very, very currently learning to love myself and to really, to be honest, bask or to even revel in my own love for myself, your book was a critical stepping stone for me. And as other people message me and they say, how did you get here? I literally just refer them to that book all the time. So thank you for writing that.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad that my journey of pain and discomfort is bearing good fruit in your life.
It certainly is. And in the lives of others. I actually spot it sometimes on bookshelves at my friends' homes.
Oh, I love that.
Which makes me feel very pleased and envious that my books shall someday be on your friends' shelves, perhaps?
Yes, it will.
So tell us about your journey. How did you write this book? Why did you write this book? Talk to us about Marc's emotional journey.
Sure. So the short version of the long, painful story is that I spent an awful lot of my life living in a way that was very disconnected from my interior world. When I say interior world, I mean not just our emotions, but emotions, intuition, spiritual intuition, a sense of the Holy Spirit's presence, all that stuff that happens in the inside spaces. I grew up in a church denomination that was very focused on head knowledge and theology and scripture and apologetics. My own story includes childhood trauma, and one of the very common responses to trauma is that disconnection, right? To step away from the painful places of feeling and to go into a defensive posture of controlling, which is about thinking through, planning, plotting. What could happen? What could I do to prevent bad things from happening? How can I protect myself and the people around me? And all of that, behavior that became a habit in my childhood led me to have certain leadership gifts, right? I became a good organizer, a good administrator, a good, team leader, because I was always thinking about how do we prevent painful problems, that's a good leadership skill, right? We want people to be safe. We want them to feel like things are predictable, and so I was kind of leading in that space. I was also, because I was disconnected from my emotions, I was also struggling with connecting with other human beings in a deep level. So that meant that I was kind of living on relational credit in my marriage. I was, having relationships that were less connected than they should have been with my staff, team leaders, close friends. What I experienced as a close relationship was what a lot of other people would identify as an acquaintanceship, and that was just kind of where I was at. And then the other symptom of this was that just because I was living in that way doesn't mean I was not feeling emotions. All humans feel emotions. Emotions happen within us. And so then this stuff was happening in me that I didn't know how to handle. I didn't know what to do with it. It was very uncomfortable. It felt uncontrolled. It felt scary. It connected me back to painful experiences in my childhood. And the way I wanted to handle that was to just get away from the feelings, right? I wanted to just make the discomfort stop, right? And so if your primary goal is to make the discomfort stop, then you use a lot of Band-Aids, quote unquote, in your life. So if I'm having a conflict with my wife and that feels really uncomfortable, the fastest way to make the discomfort stop is to power up and tell her that she's wrong, that she doesn't understand, or to ignore, to do something that diffuses it but doesn't deal with it. And that sort of thing happened in lots of relationships that I had. And so, of course, that bore fruit that it would naturally bear, of people feeling disconnected, feeling like they didn't know me. In my own marriage, a lot of brokenness and sadness for my wife because things were not as connected as she wanted them to be. So I lived this way for most of my life. And as I've got older, the consequences of that piled up. And then I got in a position where the expectations and burdens on me were beyond what I could bear by myself. So at a pretty young age, I was invited to be senior pastor of this growing church. That was just about the time that we started having kids. Just about the time that I became senior pastor, we bought a church building and did a massive remodel, and we had new staff coming on. And so there's just all of this stuff that had to be managed. And I'm living out of these expectations of what it's going to look like for me to perform, right? If my inner story is that if I can perform well for you, then you will value me and allow me space at the community with you, right? And because I was struggling with making real intimate connections, the only vehicle I had for connection was my performance, right? If you gain value from our relationship, then you'll want to be in it.
Sure.
And so then I just work harder and pedal faster. And I was in a position where I couldn't. There was no faster to pedal. I was pedaling as fast as I could go. And so that, caused a lot of damage in my relationship and my staff team and the way that I was leading the church and to my own heart. A lot of damage that I was causing. And that led to a place where I basically had an emotional meltdown. Ended up in a place of I wasn't able to perform. My sense of identity was built on my performance. So then all of a sudden, who am I? I'm failing. What does that mean? All these people are going to suddenly realize the fraud of who I am. I'm going to be kicked out. I'm going to be defrocked. My wife is going to leave me, and just like all of this is mounting up, and the pressure growing to the point that it was incapacitating for me, and I was in this season for probably about 6 months where I would work as hard and as fast as I could to prepare for the weekend so that the weekend church experience for church members would be wonderful, right? That's that planning, make sure nothing bad happens, make sure it's all good.
Always coming.
Right? And I would pull a 17-hour day so that everything could be great and everyone could be ministered to and everyone who wanted to be prayed for could be prayed for, and every single detail was handled in a perfect way. And then I would get home and I would crash in my bed and I would not get out of bed until Wednesday. And my wife has a baby at this time, and she's having to manage, a child and then another child and this grown man who can't handle his emotions by herself, right? Single mom, essentially. And then I would drag myself out of bed on Wednesday, and just through force of willpower and the powerful identity commitment that I'm not going to fail. I am not going to fail. I would get up and I would do it all again. And I lived in that cycle for a long time and just had no idea that really what was happening was I was in this high functioning depression where I had enough willpower to sort of make myself perform, not because I wanted to perform, but because to not perform was death.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Right? If I didn't perform, then any last shred of identity I had was gone, and that was not acceptable. And so then I invested whatever I had in that performance rather than my marriage or my kids or my own interior life. And obviously that process it depletes you.
Sure.
There's no recovery. And so I just got deeper and deeper and deeper into that and ended up in a really dark place. And I could see everything that I loved heading off the cliff. I could see, my wife making the very rational choice to leave me. I could see my church saying, man, you're too broken. You can't be in this position. I could see, and then on top of that, I've been a part of this church at that point for 12, almost 15 years. So if my church fires me, I'm not just losing a job, I'm losing my entire community. I'm losing my whole, purpose for getting up in the morning, all of this stuff. And so it was a really dark place, but I knew something had to change. And the difficulty was I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the tools in my backpack to make a change. You can't work yourself out of overwork. You can't work harder out of burnout. You can't, like the tools I had were not the right tools.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you follow Ondi Kolber on Instagram or Twitter. She's a therapist. She's got a book coming out shortly. I'm planning to have her on the show. Anyway, she says you can't hustle your way to wholeness.
Yes, man, that's great. Right.
That's it right there.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so many of us are committed to hustle, and oftentimes, like me, for reasons that are deeply embedded in our inner story. Not just because, we want to make a living or, we're an entrepreneur, but because we have this drive from deep in our heart that's trying to be satisfied. It's an identity drive, and so that's why what I was doing seemed reasonable to me because of that inner drive, and so then it took kind of the intervention of a couple close friends who knew me, and because of their own experiences with trauma and depression, were able to sort of see through what was happening and see, not take my story, see through the BS and actually say, look, man, you have a choice. I had one friend that actually said very clearly to me, like, you have a choice, and it's a choice to live or die.
Wow.
And you can't continue doing what you're doing, right? Yeah. It's the church. It's going to wreck the church. It's going to wreck you. It's going to wreck your marriage. And the outcome of that is going to be even worse than how you feel now. Yeah. Like what are you going to do? And so, through their care and seeing the real me, which felt terrifying, and loving me anyway, which was something I don't think I'd experienced before, that gave me kind of courage to begin attending to this. And over the course of several experiences, ended up in therapy, ended up going to a retreat for pastors experiencing burnout. That led to some other inner work, began a long process of therapy and counseling and journaling and prayer and weeping in my study and, writing angry letters to imaginary people and just all kinds of work to just sort of get out the stuff that had accumulated in me that I'd never expressed because I wasn't equipped to do it. I didn't have the tools. I didn't feel safe to do it. Yeah. And that began this process of recognizing that emotions aren't optional for us as human beings. Right? We have these labels. Some of us say, I'm an emotional person. I'm not an emotional person. And what that really means is I'm comfortable expressing emotions or I'm not comfortable expressing emotions. That's what that means. Everyone is an emotional person because emotions are a wired in chemical, electrical part of your creation, of who you are. You may not be connected to that reality. Right? Yes, you may not be aware of the emotions you're feeling, but you are feeling them. They are in there. And if you don't express them, they're going to come out in one way or another. They're going to come out in explosions. They're going to come out in misbehavior. They're going to come out in ulcers. They're going to come out in other bodily sicknesses. They're going to come out maybe in terrible circumstances. They're going to come out in mental illness. They are going to come out. And so you've got to learn how to handle that. And so I'm very much a student. And so one of the things I did as a part of my recovery journey was while I was journaling and while I was weeping, I also was studying. Mm-hmm. That's important for me. And so I began to read, everything I could get my hands on about emotions and how they work across the whole spectrum. Christian authors, psychiatrists, neurosurgeons, emotional theorists, everything I could read to understand what was happening. And that began to help me get a framework for what was happening inside this place inside of me that I felt like I couldn't access.
Yeah, sure. And
as I began to understand it, then I began to notice stuff that I didn't know was emotion that I was experiencing already. So I began to notice like, hey, I've always thought that I had in a weak stomach in regard to certain food because it was pretty frequent that I would have kind of a nauseous, twisted stomach. And I always just thought that was me getting sick or having the flu or I ate something bad. Turns out when I started paying attention, that feeling would always happen sort of in the run-up to a conflict conversation where I'm going to have a conversation with someone that's going to be painful. And that thing would happen in my gut. And before the thing was happening, I was having that happen. I had no idea it had anything to do with my emotional life. Right.
Sure.
And so I would,
just that
so
bad
I would
Thai
just,
food.
yeah, so I would just chow down a bunch of antacids, and plow forward, right? Not paying attention, disconnected, disassociated. And then I, sitting with my therapist, began to notice this pattern. Oh, this happens. You've mentioned that this happens when you have these conversations. And then I started watching and journaling about it. And turns out it happens every time, right? And so what does that mean? What's going on there? What is happening inside my body that's connected to this painful emotional experience? And I began to notice that about other things. Certain tension in my neck and shoulders that was tied to certain other experiences, and then I began paying attention to the thoughts that were happening when those bodily experiences would happen, right? And so I would notice, oh, my thoughts get really chaotic. My thoughts get really whirling and hard to pin down about the same time that my stomach gets really twisty. What's going on there? I started to put those pieces together. Oh, dummy, you're experiencing emotions. That's what that is, right? And
Yeah,
for
exactly.
for some people who are more connected to their emotions, that whole thing I described sounds crazy, right? How could you not know that was emotions?
When I first read all that stuff, I felt a bit that way because I was kind of like, yeah, I'm pretty connected to my emotions. Most people would describe me as an emotional person, especially for a man. And I remember reading through a lot of that and feeling like, I know guys like you. I'm super glad I'm not one of them. But, in the year or so since I first read it, I'm like, man, I've got plenty of things that I was not feeling.
Yeah.
In the last 2 months, I've identified hugely the feeling of sadness and loneliness that I have refused to feel. And it's because, and the way it manifests for me is I spiritualize it away.
Okay.
And I'm like, nope, shouldn't be feeling that because I had a great weekend. I had lots of friends. I'm like, people are all around me. My kids will be home later on today. No need to feel that. And then I'm like, I take that loneliness captive in Jesus' name and I send it to the cross,
Right.
And I realized a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, actually, I'm just ignoring my heart.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That message from your heart is telling you something important. Why are you feeling that emotion? There's something about that you need to pay attention to, and that was new. That was a new understanding for me because my entire experience of emotion is an obstacle. It's something that derails me. It makes me feel vulnerable. It gets in the way of a nicely planned program. It gets in the way of feeling at peace with my wife. Like that's hilarious to say, right? Like I'm at home, I feel at peace with my wife. Truth is, she has something she wants to talk to me about that she's frustrated over, but as long as we don't talk about it, we're at peace. Right? No, that's not it, right? We need to process it, but so I had all of this disconnection and came to realize, what? This stuff, it means something. In the book, I use the analogy of the emergency light on the dashboard of your car, the check engine light, and so I was sort of living a life where that light would come on. I didn't know what it meant. And I'd be like, oh, that light's irritating. Let's put some duct tape over that. I don't want to see that red flashing light. That annoys me. Let's cover it up with something. In fact, let's disconnect that light bulb, right? Well, obviously that doesn't fix the problem with your engine.
No.
It just turns off the notification. And your emotions function in that same way. They are messages from your deep inner places, giving you important information about your inner life and external circumstances that you need to understand so that you can act in a appropriate response, life-sustaining, life-giving kind of way. So when you feel that burst of anger, that means something. Or when you feel that sadness, it means something. And if you're where I was, pushing it away means you're not attending to what's going on underneath, which only means, like with the engine analogy, you're going to end up dragging your car to a mechanic to get fixed because the engine blew.
Yeah.
Right? You have to deal with what's underlying. Your emotions are meant to draw your attention to that.
Yeah, exactly. So you one of the points that you hammer home that I've really really has borne good fruit in my life is kind of the idea that your emotions always tell the truth. And whenever I quote that to anybody, they look at me so troubled. Like, oh, yes. Jonathan, what have you been reading now? But as I kind of get into it with them, and as I've gotten into it with my own self and realizing there are no bad emotions, that we should probably stop using the word negative to describe, like, negative emotions aren't negative, put it that way. They're all just trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
And as I've applied it to my children, it's been incredibly helpful. Like, my eldest will subtly manipulate his siblings during a video game session to ensure he gets what he wants. And after an hour or so, they'll all be fighting. And the younger ones cannot identify the problem, but they are mad.
Correct, yes.
And as I've come to understand emotions more, it's allowed me to say to them, anger is like the sense that you've been violated. Yeah. Now, you don't yet have the intellectual prowess to understand that you have been violated by your brother. He is taking advantage of you because he is older and more cunning.
Right.
So I'm going to help him understand that that's not a sustainable way of living, and that's not a way of living that society is going to bless. So that's where I work with him. But with number 2 and number 3, I'm going to say, okay, listen, that feeling, that's called anger. That's a really useful feeling because it communicates something that's going on. The action that you want to do might not be the right thing to do.
Right. You want to slug your brother. That's probably going to bear consequences for you. But the energy behind that desire to slug your brother is useful. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's been quite eye-opening for me. And as I sit down with others and go through that I think that's everybody's biggest fear, right? It's like, well, follow your heart. Do what your heart says. If I say tune into your emotions and feel everything and expect that your emotions are telling you the truth, everybody goes, well, are you saying that I should cheat on my wife?
I know. That's always the example.
Fascinating that a discussion on emotional health would immediately lead to your admission that you're struggling with connecting to your heart in such a way that you feel the need to cheat on your wife. Oh, I didn't say that, but you did.
Right. Yeah, that's the example that always comes up when I say emotions always tell you the truth, right? People are like, oh, no, you're suggesting that people do all these terrible and, in Christian circles, sinful things. And I'm like, nope, that's not at all. Your emotions always tell you the truth in the same way the check engine light always tells you the truth. Something's wrong or something needs to be attended to. You just might not know what. Right? Like, I'm not very educated about what goes on under the hood of my car. I'm not a car guy. And so when I see that check engine light, immediately all I think is, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to spend a bunch of money at the mechanics. Right? And if I open the hood, it might as well be like a pile of puzzle pieces under there. Like, I open it up and it's like tubes and I have no idea. It's like opening it's a monster and I have no idea. Right? So for me, I can't interpret the truth of that check engine light. I don't have the maturity or the experience or the tools to interpret it. I need a third party to solve that problem for me. But for our emotions, we can learn how things are wired up in us so that when that check engine light goes off, we can say, oh yeah, anger. As you mentioned, anger is the emotion when we believe in our own private logic that we have been violated or obstructed. So is that what's happening right now? Am I being violated or obstructed in some way? If I am, who's doing it? How's it happening? Or is it just an imagined violation? Like, maybe I feel like my sense of respect has been violated. Now I need to think about that. Do I need to be treated in a certain way? What's that about? Is it about my pride? Oh my gosh, right? So we're beginning to be able to figure out which wires go where, and then that allows you to interpret not only what you're feeling, but then to make choices about how you react. Like, for me, coming from that disconnected place, the terror was that emotions would lead me to act in an uncontrolled fashion.
I think one of the things that I really appreciated about your message is, you start off with this theological look at God possessing emotions and the emotionality of God. which wasn't something that was new or surprising to me, or even that my theological framework needed. But I'm sure for many people, absolutely that's needed. And then you launch into this very practical breakdown of what an emotion is physiologically and neurologically, and then cognitively as we interpret the events in our body. You included the Plechik's wheel of emotion, and man, a good friend of mine, we chew over that a lot, and the idea that something like I can't even remember. Run me through, but like the idea that we have these the intenseness of an emotion. You have kind of contempt, all the way up to like hatred.
Right. Yeah.
And then the sideways connections and.
Yeah, just that piece was so fascinating to me. One of the ways emotions were difficult for me is because it felt like an infinite possible variety of things, like all of these different feelings all the time. And one of the things that was useful for me was coming across some of these attempts that people have done to sort of articulate the flavors of our emotions. So Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions, that was one. There's a bunch of others where what that shows us is that, just like with colors, all the colors that exist are made up of a few colors. And if you know those few colors, you can make all the colors. If you know those few colors, you can dissect the colors and understand their parts. So when you understand that your emotion has a core meaning, and then there's also this level of intensity that goes from very low, minor irritation. Irritation is a variation of anger.
Sure.
It's a kind of anger, right? But it's just super mild. It's like I'm being violated or obstructed in a small, trivial way that gets under my skin.
My right to sit outside on my deck has been violated by this mosquito that is bothering me.
Right. Yeah. So that is anger. It's just not anger like the anger you're afraid of. Right? Sure. It's a flavor of anger, right? And so then you understand, well, it grows from irritation, it grows up to frustration, it grows up from frustration to anger, it grows up from anger to rage. Well, you understand that helps you understand, these aren't different. They're different intensities, they're different volumes, as it were. They're different ways of expressing, and so if I grew up in a household where parents expressed rage a lot, chances are I have a sort of PTSD reaction around people who have that level of anger, and it's scary to me. Well, guess what? All of those are anger. So now what am I going to do with that? Can I learn that I can express anger at a lower level? Can I learn that irritation is anger too? And what am I going to do? What am I going to do with that, right? For me, being disconnected from all of that, learning to sort of see the color wheel of emotions, as it were, really helped me be able to understand what was happening inside of me. Yeah. I mean, my experience sort of before going through this emotional recovery process was that all strong emotion felt like anger to me. And the reason for that was all emotion was irritating. Right? I mean, like if you think about my story that I shared with you, emotion felt out of control.
Sure. Right.
And it was crucial for me and my identity to not be out of control.
Right.
And so any emotion was going against my plan, like my plan of having this conversation go smoothly, or my plan of having a peaceful evening, or my plan of not having to think about that awful, painful thing. Any emotion was like a little person jabbing at me going, no, let's do that thing you don't want to do, which feels like a violation, right? Yes. So whatever emotion I was feeling, the emotion I could identify was anger. And then that's not adaptive or helpful in relationship, right? To express that, and so you get underneath and you see what's really down there. Now I can start unthreading it, like I have my daughter's almost 13. We're right now in the, the classic historical parental struggle of managing media, right? How much time do you get on your device and in what contexts and what things can you do? And everything I have to say about that, everything is a giant violation to my daughter. She hates any kind of governance on her media use at all. So we're trying to work through that. So it's not uncommon to have an experience where, hypothetically, she uses her iPad without permission.
Sure.
right? And then I walk into the room, and all of a sudden there's this flurry of like throwing pillows around and stuffing stuff behind her, and you're like, hey, what's going on?
Check out on me and my subtleties.
Right. I was just putting away my laundry. Wait, no. You don't ever put away your laundry of your own free will. What's going on here? Oh, was that your iPad under the pillow? Let me take a look at that. Oh, you've used your iPad without permission. Okay, so in that moment, sort of my more natural kind of older self way of reacting is just anger, just a flood of anger. Like, my daughter has deceived me. She's violated my expectations again on this same point we've talked about 100 times. She needs to learn a lesson so that this behavior stops. Right? And so I have this anger that is then expressed in some kind of over-the-top parental response, right? So, you're banned from your iPad for 100 years and you're never going to have this again. And not only that, but you can't have a cell phone till you're 18 and, whatever, right? So it's just over the top, which of course triggers her and puts her into angry reactivity. And it just becomes this great angry party, right? Whereas what I've learned about myself is that anger, there's stuff beneath it that is more helpful for me to pay attention to. So maybe I look at that situation and I go, oh, how am I feeling about this moment right now? Well, I'm angry, but what else am I feeling? Well, I'm a little bit sad that my daughter is not telling me the truth.
Sure. Yeah.
That feels like a loss of trust. I don't like that. I'm a little bit worried that my daughter is becoming sneaky. And that's not something that's going to be helpful for her in her life or in our family. I'm a little bit anxious because I don't like conflict. And this conversation is definitely going to be a conflict. And I'm a little bit frustrated that I happen to be the parent at home that's going to have to deal with it. And I'm like, so there's this whole panoply of feelings that are happening that are beneath the anger. Yes. And if I can pay attention to that, I can begin to separate what's gold from what's fool's gold. Right? So in that moment, the fool's gold is my daughter has disobeyed me and she needs to be corrected so this never happens again. Right? Well, anger, like we talked about earlier, is the emotion that you feel when you feel like you've been violated. Okay, so have I been violated by my daughter using her iPad without my permission? I mean, not real. It's not an attack on me personally.
No.
Right? She's doing something she wants to do. She's disobeying, which is something kids do. She wants to play a game on her iPad, which is something kids do. None of that is about me. Like, she's not using the iPad to spite me. She's using the iPad because she wants to use the iPad. It's not about me at all. So why am I feeling violated?
She's not doxing you online, posting all your...
Yeah, right. Yeah, so why am I feeling violated? Well, I'm feeling violated because her disobeying me feels like disrespect. Ooh, and I carry this story in my heart that I should be respected at all times by my children, or else I'm not being a good dad. And I have this baggage I told you about where performance is part of how I get my identity. And so if I'm not performing as a good dad, now that's an attack on my identity. Her obedience is an attack. Her disobedience is an attack on my identity. And that's what I'm angry about. Okay, Mark, that has nothing to do with your daughter. That's something you should go process with your wife or your therapist, or you should pray about that, or maybe you should journal about that. But just landing like a ton of bricks on her is not going to change your feeling about that. Right? So now I've noticed, oh, this is something that's worth looking into. Well, what's the goal of this situation? Well, I am honestly really sad that she lied to me, because what matters to me is our relationship. And if she's going to lie, then my relationship with her is devalued and I am losing trust. I'm sad about that. Is that worth talking about? Hey, guess what? That's actually more important than the fact that she used the iPad.
Yes, exactly.
So now when I have the conversation with her, that anger that came up in me becomes a flag that says, hey, look, check the engine. What's really being violated here? Am I being violated? No. Trust is being violated. And that is bringing up energy in me because I value my relationship with my daughter and I care about her and I want us to have a trusting relationship. Okay, let's talk about that. Sweetheart, let's talk about that. I know you want to be trusted by me so you can have privileges. I know I want to trust you. This situation that just happened is challenging that. What can we do? Right now we can have a conversation about the gold, what's really valuable, and I'm not reacting to the fool's gold, which really wasn't about her to begin with.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I put out a list of parenting tips the other day, and And number one is like, own your stuff.
Right. Exactly.
And I think I probably had intuited that for a long time. But really, I think since reading your book, it gave me the tools to be like, okay, now I get it. Yes. That example is so applicable and relevant to my life. It's like if you really loved me,
right.
I sound like a juvenile. And I'm meant to be the parent, so I can model slowing down.
Yeah.
And being present, attending to my emotional process. Maybe that's a more useful usage of my time.
Yeah. Well, and the fun thing for the parenting side of things, when your child sees you doing that process, that is you teaching them the building blocks of emotional maturity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The consequence about the iPad isn't teaching them really anything. Right? It's either gonna teach them to be more sneaky so they don't get caught in the future, or it's just teaching them about certain boundaries that you have, and you hear them when they talk to their friends, they're like, oh yeah, my dad's super strict about that. Right? That's what they learned. They learned that you were super strict about that.
All the neuroscience research says punishment accomplishes not what you think it is accomplishing. Like it does not work. That is to say, it does not work to help your child. It works to drive a wedge between you very, very effectively. So you the book's been out then for a year. How's your feedback? Are you getting a sense that people are connecting with the message? Are you changing the world yet?
Am I changing the world? That's such a scary question that triggers all of my performance stuff. Book publishing is a super weird thing. It's a very strange culture to be in. It's hard to know what level of impact you're making. I certainly would love more people to read the book, but my experience has been that the folks who have read it and have taken the time to communicate with me about it have found it not just good, but helpful. They found it practical and helpful in their spiritual journey. Like not only are they learning tools, like you said, about their emotions, but it has opened up a quality in their relationship with God that's new or different or deeper for them, which is exactly what happened for me, right? I came out of this process to a place where having an intimate relationship with God is no longer a code word that I use, right? In my old life, relationship with God was a code word that referred to, did I spend enough time doing my morning devotional? Did I do a Bible word study this week? Did I pray through my prayer list? Did I do all of my religious practices? And if I did all those religious practices, then I have a good relationship with God.
Doing.
Right. And I wasn't trying to be legalist about that. It was just that was the only way. Like God's not here in the room concretely with me. How do I have a relationship with God? That was the only set of tools I had because I was not connected in my inner places. And so now that I'm starting to do these things, to begin stopping, to be attentive to what's happening in my body, to begin paying attention to these signals from my inner life and ask, what's that about? Turns out the Holy Spirit has been in there the whole time talking to me. And I'm starting to be able to have a sense of, oh, right. God is with me. I'm not alone, really, truly. I can hear from God in a way that before, the me before would have raised an eyebrow at, and that has been happening for me. And I've heard people who've read the book say this has really helped in that capacity for me. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, on the surface of it, a book about emotions for some people doesn't sound like a spiritual book. It doesn't sound like it's something that the church should be talking about, right? But the truth of the matter is, if I'm not connected to my emotions, that is how we hear the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, sure.
That is the way. Like intimacy, the economy of intimacy is emotional exchange. If I can't be present to my emotions, I don't have the capacity to be intimate with anyone, with myself. Like the project you're doing right now of sitting and coming to understand your own heart and loving yourself. You can't do that if you're disconnected from your emotions. The better relationships that you want with perhaps your spouse or your kids or people that you work with, that can't happen if you're not listening to your emotions. And then for those of us that follow Jesus, you want that John 15 experience, right?
Yeah.
You want to live in the reality of the abiding life where Jesus said, in that day, you'll know that I'm in the Father and you are in me and I'm in you. And that's not just theology. That's a real lived experience. Well, guess what? If you aren't paying attention to your emotions in your inner life, you cannot have that visceral experience. You can't have it, because the way you connect with that is through your emotions. And I don't mean just like, oh, I feel goosebumps. I mean, how you hear what's happening in the inside spaces is all of the emotional feedback system. That's how it happens.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That makes total sense to me. I mean, my tradition is big on hearing God's voice, and we have tools and frameworks for how to do that. And I'd learned how to do that, and I felt like I had a pretty good sense of being able to hear God's voice. And so when I read your stuff and began listening to my heart had a lot to say. Turns out, like God, who is always speaking to us, my heart was always speaking to me, and I was ignoring. But the listening process looks very much the same. What's that Pete Scazzero quote about emotional spiritual health?
Well, he says in a number of places, in various versions, he basically says that we can't mature spiritually if we're not maturing emotionally. And the way that I think about it is that those two aspects of our life are sort of connected by a rubber band. You know, like they're not one to one, but as you grow in one, the other one comes alongside, and the other one is a limiting factor. Right.
For sure.
So for me, you know, my experience was that I had all kinds of Christian training. I had all kinds of Christian discipleship. I had degrees. I have the ability to study the Bible in the original languages. I had all these prayer tools. I had all of this Christian discipleship, and none of it was touching my inner places. And that was not a failure of those teachers or leaders or those processes. That was the failure of my disconnection. Because I was disconnected from my inner life, that stuff couldn't filter in the way where it would be most helpful. And so what's happened for me is those same practices that I used to do, you know, worship and study and prayer and all those things have become richer for me.
Yeah.
They have become more powerful. They've become more real to me, because now I'm not just reading words. Now I'm hearing the presence of the Spirit in those things in a way that I never did before.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Even like you said, as I've been on this kind of journey for my own part in the last month or two, loving myself, I've at moments felt guilty for not spending more time in prayer or not turning to all the tools that I have had. And like you said, there's nothing inherently wrong with those tools, but I felt like God had said, like, I need you to focus on you. And really, the truth is you need you to focus on you, or you're going to miss out on all the things that you could enjoy. And so week by week, as I've been sitting with my own heart, meditating on my own love, looking into what my fear tells me is a bottomless pit. But it turns out it's not a bottomless pit. It's just maybe a darkened tunnel that I have to get through to the other side of all my feelings and fears. As I've been doing that day by day, my like you said, my worship is so much richer.
Right.
I turn up at church or with our friends at their home, and within moments I am sobbing with joy of the Lord. I'm singing at the top of my lungs. I'm dancing like at the front of the church, like not figuratively. I am leaping around and
yeah.
I am, expressive, and it's amazing. I'm very thankful.
I want to just use an interesting example that happened to me that I think opens up some of that. A lot of us, I think, don't realize how limited and controlled we have been as a result of being disconnected from this part of our life, because it shows up in ways that we are not conscious of. So here's an example that you would think has nothing to do with spirituality, nothing to do with emotions. I've been a singer all of my life. I was a worship pastor for 15 years. I've been in bands. I sing all the time. Okay, I did not notice that this was happening until someone else pointed it out to me. After I had gone through the significant recovery process, where I'd really kind of come over some significant hurdles and had some revelation, some breakthrough, my vocal range doubled.
Come on, that's awesome.
my capacity to sing grew, it improved. And that didn't happen because of practice. It didn't happen because I was taking special lessons. What I believe happened was that because of my particular package of baggage, my performance drive, which is so deeply rooted to my identity, was limiting my vocal range. Because if I was going to step outside of that range, I was going to step into territory that was harder. Like within the range I was comfortable with, I could perform at a high level and I knew I would do well. But to push outside of that into a higher falsetto was going to require me to step into spaces that I didn't have as much control. Maybe I was going to be flat, whatever. And so just internally, it wasn't conscious, just internally, my physiology limited my capacity to sing outside. Amazing. And so then I go through this process of emotional discovery and freedom, and all of a sudden I'm singing at church and I'm just jumping into harmony parts that I would never have sung before because I would be too afraid to get it wrong. I was singing, stronger. I was singing higher. And I didn't even notice this was happening until somebody pointed out, "Oh, hey, Mark, what happened? Have you been practicing? You just jumped on that harmony. What happened? You didn't used to be able to lead this song in this key."
That's so cool. Oh, I love that.
And I think that's a great example of how there are limitations that are on us, physical, spiritual, emotional limitations that we've put on ourselves as a form of protection.
For sure, yeah.
And when we become capable of being present to our emotions and hearing what they're telling us and following through on that information, like the check engine light, doing something about it, right? Then those internal limitations, we don't need them as much, because it's not scary to step into those places in the same way that it used to be. It's not going to attack our value. We can try that stuff out and see what happens.
Yeah, that's good. So Marc Schelske guarantees that your vocal range will double if you read his book. And certainly if your main thing is that you are a bodybuilder, your muscles will grow twice the size once you get in touch with your emotions.
Yes, I do guarantee that.
So speaking of vocal range, you have been doing the audiobook, I believe.
Yes. So the audiobook is finally coming out. I got to do the process of reading it, which was a painful adventure, all in its own self. I got to the point where all I could hear in my brain was the sound of my mouth smacking and making all kinds of weird mouth noises. It was horrifying. But the final result is not that. I promise you, it is not a recording of mouth noises. It is actual words from the actual book, and it's available. Will be available at audible.com and through Amazon on March 26th.
Wonderful, so good. I know what you mean. I recorded I performed one audiobook, and I was dreaming my own nondescript voice droning on and on and on. Yeah. It's a nightmare. Poor people. But Marc has a lovely voice, as you've just heard. So, guys, make sure you go out and grab that, whether you prefer the written printed page or the digital page or the audio page. Marc, would you pray for us as we wrap up?
I will. God, you wired us up in all of our complexity, this crazy, unique body that you've given us that's connected to our mind, that's connected to our sense of self, and that is connected to our spirit, to our connection to you. And this aspect, our inner life and particularly our emotions, it is so important. And so I pray for everyone who hears this that they will just have a growing sense of desire to grow in this area, to bring this aspect of their life into discipleship so that they can mature. And maybe for some people who are in a place like I was, maybe the courage to look at some of these painful places for the first time, to understand how our lives and hearts are impacted by the way that we feel, and how that can be not just a heavy thing or an obstacle, but in fact a blessing from you that allows us to live with wisdom. Thank you so much for your love and for making us the way that you made us. In Jesus' name, amen.
You've been listening to the podcast with me, Jonathan Puddle. I've dedicated my life to helping people access the freedom that God designed for them and to love others sacrificially, just like God does. Basically, I think we're meant to live like God himself, and I want to help you get there. This podcast is part of that, and every week I interview people to dig into the rich soul of a Jesus-centered life. Make sure to check out some of the earlier episodes. I've had everyone from Olympic athletes to local friends to famous DJs and major Christian leaders like Brian Zahn, Priscilla Shirer, and Sheila Walsh. If this podcast has been a blessing to you, head over to jonathanpuddle.com and grab my free book, You Are the Solution to Someone's Problem. I'm pretty sure it's going to brighten your day. And if you enjoy that too, then would you consider supporting me on Patreon? You can get one-on-one spiritual coaching from me, as well as a private supporters-only podcast with unique content that I don't make available to the public. There's a number of other benefits there as well. You'll find me at patreon.com/JonathanPuddle. Thank you so much for listening, and may you be filled with grace and peace from the Lord God, who created all things, holds all things together, and is personally invested in